Hi, everyone. Welcome to MC Radio. We are officially back on air. I'm Mara Edlin.
And I'm Chloe Rife.
Hello, hello. All right, so we're switching it up a bit, and we decided to bring trending topics that are going on in the workplace, things we hear our colleagues talking about, and just, pour some insight, some of the things we're hearing. So we're going to kick things off. We're going to jump right in. And I wanted to talk about the topic related to like the culture of a team, the energy of a team. And so I'll first just preface some of the conversations that come up or the observations I made, and then we'll dialogue a little bit about it. So what I have found is here in the sales organization here in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, there's like this incredible energy. And we always get the feedback that Rio Rancho is one of the best sites to visit, that we have that good energy. And I know for me, there's been a couple of instances where I talk to individuals and when they describe, their work day or their boss, and yes, this is within HP, I'm like, oh, that's nothing like our culture. So it throws me off a bit. And I just wanted to, talk a little bit about that and then maybe give some ideas on how you can increase culture and good energy on the team.
Yeah, and I think it's important because I came from Rio Rancho and I felt the energy. I was involved in the groups, got to go to all the events that we put on. And even on a random Thursday, we'd have food trucks outside and we'd be getting coupons and everyone, I'd post it on Instagram and they'd be like, I want to work for HP. That looks like so much fun. And to me, I think I kind of took it for granted a little bit because I'm like, yeah, it's just a cutting edge company and they care about having ping pong tables. And then the world shuts down and we all, I think, lose a little bit of that. And then for me, second tier, I move and take a completely remote position. So I'm not even on like the communications, which, some people auto delete. And now I miss them. Now I'm like, what's going on? I have to like ping people to be like, what's the buzz? Because there's very little buzz unless you're creating it yourself if you're a remote employee.
So you bring up something good I wasn't even thinking about for the conversation. And it is that, so just your opinion, like, do you think if you go into a site, it's very different than creating that vibe virtually?
100%. 100%. Because yeah. I think when you go into a site, it's just a part of your routine to be around people. It's a part of your routine to say hi to people in the hallways. And I guess you don't realize like how much energy that actually generates for you. And then you take back to your team, because if you don't have it, like I have to depend on my own generating of energy all day long. And since I've given up caffeine, that's even been harder. So I don't know, like I think doing it virtually, you have to almost fabricate it, and then people have to buy in. That have to buy in part is, I think, what's probably hard for a lot of teams. I've been even on other team calls and they're just like pulling. And they're like, how's everybody's day? And then no one comes off mute. And it's like, what? Even the person who's trying gets nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point around fabricated. And what's also interesting too is, at our Rio Rancho site, like we don't have official cubicles, if you will, right? It's situated where like people are we're right here, right there. Everything's lowered. So like I can stand up and talk to the next row or the row beyond that. And what I found is at a couple of the other HP sites I've gone to, people are very focused. If you like walk down their aisle and you're like, hey, good morning, they're like, oh, why is this lady talking to us?
They're not on.
Yeah. So I think also on top of being face to face, I think there's something to the way the office is set up. I think there's something to like getting very comfortable with like everyone around you can hear every conversation going on. I can remember, I often talk about it and you know who I'm talking about, but you'd walk into the office and there's this guy on my team, and this is back when we were hunters. And I showed up probably 7:45, 8, and I walk in and he's already hitting the phone. So like you get this energy and buzz, like I got to hit the phones, right? And virtually you have to be disciplined and dedicated and think about what block am I going to put in to hit the phones, right? So there's something to the energy of other people, no doubt. So when you say fabricated, have there been any like successful situations you've seen where like, oh, that worked really, really well?
Well, I think a teammate and I are developing a few, so maybe TBD on that one. But it has to be intentional. When I joined the team, there was a lot of, we have weekly happy hours. We, do all these things with these other teams. And so I think a little bit of it was in place, but then just over time, people get burned out. Right. And then some
Yeah.
leadership changes. And I think that's a huge part too. If there's any shift on the team and someone who was responsible for doing birthdays every month is no longer with the team, then like, you have to pick it up, right? And I think it takes, I don't know, what do you think? Is there a certain type of personality that needs to be on every team to ensure that gets done?
Yeah, I think it's hard because in virtual in general, even outside of team culture, team energy, you have to work twice as hard to engage,
Mhm.
right? Because to your point, you have to go set out, be intentional about who you're going to talk to and what you're going to talk about. All that natural, I can swivel around in my chair and talk to someone is just, out of sorts. And I think you might even need a couple of people like that, right? Like imagine some of the teams who not an issue, right? But they're introverted and they're into that,
Mhm.
right? Their level of feeling included can be different. I know an individual that I work with, and when I visited with them, you could tell they were literally not okay with working from home,
Mhm.
right? You could tell by their energy, their attire, right? And not that people need to get ready per se, but I thought to myself, this person's been yearning to go to the office, but literally this person needs the office,
Yeah.
right? And it dawned on me like, wow, can you imagine what's really going on in their heart and in their mind every day, like not feeding off that energy? But to your point, I think you do have to be intentional. It's hard because it feels like, okay, here's Mara with her Wednesday question. But you do have to, I think you do have to create the space for it. It might not be weekly, but you have to create some space for it.
Well, and I think too, like you have to, one, I think acknowledge that not everybody works that way, right? So I think when we're talking about like going to a hybrid model and the choice, I'm not a part of
Mhm.
any of those decisions, right? But is it going to be an individual person's choice? And then how does the manager make sure that that person chose it for their optimal workplace rather than like, this is maybe just where they feel the most flexible, I guess. I don't know, because to your point, like
Mm.
when someone for every single day you see them hasn't gotten ready on camera, you can't ignore physically seeing somebody like be affected by their situation because maybe they don't want to get dressed up every day, but then maybe that's a telltale sign that they are struggling. And so how do you even
Mm.
manage that balance and where does that choice start? And how do you check and
Yeah.
balance that as it goes on, I guess?
Yeah. And you can't, right? Because one time on a team call, I was like, how are you guys feeling? Red, green, yellow. I had took, what you had talked about on one of your posts. And I'm like, how do people feel? And, I did feel people were honest, but not being able to actually see, you kind of don't know. You could tell by the way someone carries themselves. You could tell if someone's in the hallway, like getting off of a phone call, kind of frustrated or really excited. Like you can tell, like, oh, that person has things, really going on in their life. But I think the other thing that's interesting, regardless of virtual, is team energy and what you allow for. So I've had a couple of opportunities to meet with people across the globe, and it's
Mhm.
very cool. It's eye-opening for me because culturally everyone's so different, right? And in a couple of those conversations, they told me, as an example, I was doing a brand building, really small session. People were just talking about it. And a lot of the individuals I was talking to hadn't even started the exercise of asking their manager or a second manager, right? Some key details. And they said, culturally, that's not really like what I do. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, we talk about the business and it's about results, period. And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I spend way more time, focused on like who is someone? What are they about? What's their character? What are their passions in life? What's their dream job? How can you implement their passions and like, meld it together with what HP does to make sure they feel fulfilled? And they're like, yeah, no,
No.
that's not the case. And I'm like, like, what do you mean? Another example was an individual, and she was telling me her style of selling, and she's very laid back, very kind, really, really wants to make sure she's solving a problem. And she was saying that the individual she works with and even her manager, it's almost like they don't have time for all that. Like they just want to cut to the chase, they're direct, they talk over each other. So I think regardless of virtual and face to face, there's just something to be said as a leader on how you're leading and inspiring.
Hmm.
I think for me, a happy employee is always going to deliver, right? Everyone's here to do great in life, right? If you always focus on what's the status, what's the update, why, you're not really talking a lot about the business. I think you're kind of missing the point of leadership, especially in 2021 and beyond.
So why do people gravitate towards that leadership style?
That's a great question. I recently was in this training, and I don't know if this is why, but it was an aha moment. And it was around a lot of leaders right now today are in their role and have been in their role because they
Mm.
were high performers that drove the business, not because they were innovative, inspiring, and, warm and fuzzy people. So and honestly, I mean, I hate to go there, right? But in America, it's about getting your money, hustling, grinding, rising
Mhm.
to the top, climbing the ladder, good retirement plan. So I think it's hard for our culture, at least it's just my viewpoint, to peel away from that and center in on, are people balanced? Are people healthy? Are people getting everything they need to feel, excited about what they do? I don't know. I think it's our culture.
Well, and I think it's only I don't want a little bold. I think it's only getting worse, right? Where I think like, yes,
Mm,
it's increasing that companies are even talking about mental health and like happy meters on employees. But on the other side, I think it's interesting because people have started to monetize everything that they do. And I don't know if it's because of social
mm,
media, but like you want to flip furniture on the side. Now all of a sudden you have like an Etsy store and you got an Instagram. And then, even just like being a brand ambassador,
mm.
every single thing you do is like a way to make money anymore. And people are kind of like doing it all. So I don't know. I don't know
Yep.
how to like stop the grind because clearly there needs to be some sort of division because there is a rise in like mental health
Yeah.
issues, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think the grind, and this is just through me failing a lot and being someone who is very fixated on money. I do think if the grind, let me take a step back actually. If you lead with your passion and grind on that,
Mm,
I think the abundance, success, and dollars just naturally flow to you from the universe, period. And
mm,
that's just my personal experience, right? When I chased money, yeah, I got it, but it left quick as it came, right? It wasn't until I centered in on my passion to like, man, I just want to help people around me. I want people to not fail like I did. It wasn't until that I started getting opportunities and those things. So I think, even when I think of side hustles, there's a lot that are cool, right? Some people are like, oh, we
mhm.
should start like storage space or get a car wash. And I love all of that, right? Trust me. If it's talking about money, it makes sense to me. But like I don't jump at it the way I would have because it's not like
Mm.
where my heart is at, right? So I think if you lead with passion, the other stuff actually flows. And you're right, people don't do that, right? They're just like you said, they're on Etsy or they're bored or they're, sounds good
Yeah.
for right now. Yeah.
So then do you think that because so many people are starting side hustles, or I think honestly, there's been a little bit of a mass exodus from corporate America to like start your own thing. And obviously, like statistically, they show like after a world pandemic or war, like more small businesses are started. But I think mix that with social media and like how many people are now influencers and ascribe to
Mm.
like be paid to just live. Do you think that like the 8 to 5 or graduate and go on to get a corporate job, do you think all that structure also needs to shift to make room for this?
I do. Ugh, it pains me to say that because the reason I struggle and the reason I hesitated and how I said that is I'm very much made up of an old school upbringing. So
Mm,
regardless of my age, like my grandfather, you didn't take days off of work.
right.
Like, what is that? I remember telling him, like, I think I had a dentist appointment. I was young, like working at Olive Garden, and oh, I'm off today. And he's like, why? And you're like, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to take off, right? And the reason I struggle is because I think you do. I hate to say that my old school idea and other people I work with school idea is stale, but
Mm,
frankly it is, right? We have a world that has shifted on us whether we care or not, to your point. And I think I don't think you need to go to school to run a successful business.
mm,
I hate to, even though, don't get me wrong, I believe in college. I love it on someone's resume.
mhm.
There's so much you learn through a college experience, whether that's just sheer perseverance. It's just being an
Yeah.
adult and being on your own. I mean, trust me, there's a million things you learn, but to really make dollars, I don't think that's what you have to do, right? And I've worked with people that, as an example, are like, well, they don't have a college degree, I won't even consider them.
Mhm,
And I'm thinking, ooh, we're probably missing out on some crazy talent
mhm,
with like that mindset. So I do think we need to make room for it. Only because if we want to stay really relevant and we want to be competitive and not competitive from hiring talent. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about like competitive in the marketplace, market share competitive.
mhm.
I think you have to make space for brilliant minds, and I think you have to hire what do they call it? Like natural genius. That's probably not the
Uh-huh.
right word, but you have to hire that. You can't just
Yeah.
hire the old school stuff anymore.
Right. And I like being competitive and relevant because it's crazy too with how fast you can get your information out there. Like I was scrolling the other day and all of a sudden I see this video of an extender. You fold it open. It looks like, just a folio. You put it on your laptop and you flip it open and you have 3 displays for your laptop wherever you are. It looked like, thank you. That response you just gave me, I was like,
I'm like,
holy
what?
smokes, what is this? And to me in technology, I'm like, I've never seen this before, you know, but
Mm,
that may be their one product, their one life savings, their one Instagram account. And they got me, who's been working in technology for 6 years, to be like, that was freaking cool. Right. So you kind of have to
yep.
think about how to take all these mini entrepreneurs, or they're full-fledged entrepreneurs, but they have these mini pockets that they're just putting out there and monetizing. It's like, how do we stay
Yeah.
relevant? How do we take that talent and that mind share? And what are the blocks? Why didn't we hire that person? Why isn't that person already working for a technology company with that idea?
Yeah. Well, and you brought up something that just has me thinking too. A lot of us don't want to admit it, but the natural human state or being wants connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
Track with me here for a second. And while we say, oh, no, we're about money and we're about success and I'm about sending my kids to college, really, the human was built to connect, period.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about the person who created, which by the way, I'm like, for real? Like, let's talk
Right.
about that. The fold out monitor, or the person who's making jewelry and showing up on Etsy,
Mm-hmm.
or the person who's learned to stitch really cool masks and is selling on Amazon. The thing about that is what they do is connecting to other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if I'm an Instagram influencer, I might just be a cool young kid who just gets fly and, looking cool, like doesn't even really, not that like they don't do anything, but they don't do anything.
Yeah.
But they're likable and people feel like they can connect and relate. And that's actually what all of us like. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, I mean, yeah, we want the outcomes and we want the cool house in Santa Fe sitting on a hill with a pool. And yeah, we want that. But along the way, if you're not genuinely connecting with people, I think you could miss the boat,
Yeah.
honestly.
Well, because along the way, somebody broke the mold, and somebody figured out how to lead with passion, make money doing it, and they didn't have to go the traditional route.
Absolutely. The other thing is, that kind of ties into that is sometimes I think we don't feel like there's space or enough pie, as Dan would say, right, for everybody. And what
Mhm.
I mean by that is, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but you're like, God, we need change in this world and it's too big. How am I going to do all of it? Right. And I look at people like Pink as an
Mhm.
example, right? My mom was telling me, I didn't even read it. My mom was telling me about the beach volleyball players, and some of them did not want to wear the uniform. And for those of you who don't know, the uniform is like the cute two-piece swimsuit.
Mhm.
And there was a couple of countries very uncomfortable with that, right? So they went the conservative route and they got fined for not being in uniform. Okay. And Pink was like, I'm taking care of your fines for you. But there's a lot of things Pink does that I've noticed, right? Anytime she's gotten certain awards, when I see her speak, she's very philanthropic and gives
Mhm.
to a lot of things. And I think if each of us are doing a piece of that, and it has to do with our passion and pouring something, there is enough money to go be made. There are people
Yeah.
that want your service or your product. Like, there's so much going on in the world. There's space for all of that, honestly, right? And you can change the world in that exact way and make money doing it.
Mhm. Let's hate a little bit on Jeff Bezos, because there's all this statistics out there that he has enough money to solve all the sustainability issues that are happening to our world. Him as one individual. And here is his ex-wife. And yes, they got divorced before he hit, pandemic money, because that was real money. But she took more than half of her fortune and donated it to all these different causes, right? So there's two, and he's up in space spending money, telling people to spend, I think the one guy who went with him spent $28 million to ride with him in his spacecraft to shoot up into space and orbit for a little bit, right? So it's interesting when you get into the conversation about side hustle and money and passions and, human rights issues, because they're all starting to get like this. And then we look at rich people and the wealthy, and we want them to solve a lot of our problems. And then there's people like Pink who do thing after thing consistently. And then we have Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, me and my mom talk about this often because I'm not in their shoes, let's just be clear, I don't got that kind of money.
Oh, you don't have trillions of
So
dollars?
I don't know what I would do, but I often see things like that, just statistics about, the rich or the 1%, if they did this, you could
Yes.
solve world hunger. And I'm like, well, why don't they do that? Or the adage around taxes, right? Like
Mhm.
really low income, they can get through a year and get through tax season well, really rich can, but everybody who sits in the middle, like 50% of their money, goes away from a tax perspective. And I don't know. I mean, some of it is, so the Jeff Bezos when I was 19 would have been like one of my inspirations, right? Like, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm trying to get a spacecraft, right? And it probably drove me to go do really great things. So I think there is probably actual inspiration in that for certain people, because
Mhm.
for me, when I do see something expensive or cool or amazing, it gives me a little pep in my step to hit the next
Mhm.
gear when I get back to work, right? But in the exact same regard, come on, it's a small percentage of your money to help people seriously. And
Yeah.
I think if what you want to leave behind is that you're the person who brought somebody with $28 million with you into space, well, okay, I guess, right? I know for me, and I would hope a lot of the world, that's not what you want to leave behind, right? Your
Mhm.
purpose is not that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Your purpose should be like, what are those really cool legacies, and what are those ways that someone made you feel, or how they helped you get out of a bad space or a bad financial situation. I think that's, what's really important about us as we move through the earth and move through life.
Well, and obviously there's only one him. So I'm hoping that the rest of us can do
Well, what do
those
you think?
small actions. I mean, again, like you said, I have no idea. I could never fathom having that kind of money. I have student loans from an undergraduate degree of a state school. Okay. Like we are not
Hey, shout out to the people with student
right.
loans.
And like all this stuff with
Legit,
like
yeah.
student loan forgiveness, I'm like, mine are private. I'm like, those kids need to pay for their school. I have to, but even in my level here, I get a certain way about money and I get a certain way about, different things. So I can't even remotely understand what it's like to be him. And for all we know, those are
Yeah.
Instagram statistics, and he has a team of people who funnel money to charities, right? I mean, you probably
Yeah.
have to when you get to that tax bracket. We're talking about taxes. But at the same time, to your point, a legacy, like, would he rather say, I spent $100 billion on sustainable effort so that 5 more generations can live? To me, way cooler use of your money. Way more
I
people are going to
agree.
be on your team. If you care about how people think of you, do some good in this world.
Well, and I think not to go there, but I'll go there for just a second. I think sometimes we forget that we have a creator
Mm-hmm.
and that he created us in a certain way to go execute in the world. And it's not really just your money. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like you didn't do it by yourself, right? And if your creator didn't afford the mindset or afford those thoughts or afford in you the hard work it takes to get there, or afford you the moments where you cross paths with really amazing people that can boost your idea, whatever it is, right? There's always, you never did it by yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it can get a little bit selfish to not participate differently in the world
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't do it by yourself. And
Right.
without your creator, you wouldn't even, I mean, none of that would be, right? And so the reason I say that is because, like, sometimes even I forget, like, this isn't my money,
Mm.
right? Even Camden, right? He's not just my son, right? He's the
Mm-hmm.
creator's son. So I actually have a job and duty to ensure that he moves through the world a certain way, not just I need to raise him the way I need to raise him. Like, no, I need to raise him on behalf of, right? It's just my job. Like, so again, people with money, I'm like, I think your job's probably, you probably received that to do something different with that, right?
Mm.
But what do I know?
Receive
I
that
don't,
to do
I don't got,
something different with it.
I don't got 100 billion. So I might be a lie, right?
He's tipping the scales to apparently a trillion. So the conversation will only be amplified. But yeah, it's interesting you say that and you bring up kids. And I mean, obviously, we're talking about work and money and all the different things you can do. But because we don't have $1 trillion, there are things that are
Yep.
happening right now. And like the pandemic for me and for you and for every other, I'll just say it, woman or parent was very, very different. I know for me, it was really, really hard. And I even had a great support system, but it was just the year of pressure and the year of your worlds colliding. And then where our company did certain things, no one really did anything to, or nothing, there was nothing we could do to alleviate it, right? It just kind of was like March 13th is regular life, March 14th, figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting now because there's a lot of focus on it now, but like what do we do to help people over the last year, because it's been damaging, I think.
Yeah. What's hard is how to focus, because I think completely new subsets of groups have been created
Mm.
through, I'm just going to call it turmoil, right? Or change or what have you. And what I mean by that is I think about some of the people that helped me with my poor house. It has moments where it's fallen apart. But when people come, right, the people that used to help me could show up like next day. Well, now it's like, okay, I'm going to schedule you 2 weeks from now. When they come, I always ask, like, is it busy? And they're like, yeah, people don't want to work. I'm like, huh?
Mm.
They're taking a full advantage of unemployment benefits and all of that, right? And so there's a group that we have to think about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, help people who want to help themselves comes to mind that I've heard before, right? So there's like that group. then there's I feel like a newborn group of people, probably like ourselves, who are blessed, still have a job, like they're rocking it, but mentally are struggling, right? Because one
Yeah.
thing we may have mentioned it before, but you have to really sit with yourself differently than you used to,
Mhm.
right? The solidarity and those moments of being alone are different. And when that happens, I know for me, right, you come to terms with all kinds of good and bad things that have happened in your life or happened in your day or that you want to shift gears on. So when we talk about, oh, we really need to help, it's just kind of interesting because it's like, who would you focus on helping?
Yeah.
In the scenario I just talked about, I probably would not consider first and foremost lower economic people who haven't gone back to work. That probably sounds really bad, but I'd probably focus on, that middle group that is really driving, still trying to work at it, but they have a lot on their plate. They are feeling stressed. Their mental health isn't what it used to be because they aren't making those connections, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like there's all these new subsets of people that have been created through the pandemic or through, like you said, March 14th, all of a sudden, like you have to go do this.
Yeah. Well, and two, I think the immediate thing you can do is check on your sphere of influence, right? Like
Yep.
be intentional with checking in and really checking in, right? Because I know for me, like I took last year as everybody has all these hard things going on. So when someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm not going to just dump all my stuff on them, right? I'm not going to tell them, oh, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and oh, I'm living with 9 people in my house and I can't get on the phone call, even though I started a new job because we're all sharing internet and there's 3 kids distance learning in the other room. And my kid is wondering why I can't give her any attention. I mean, the list goes on and on
On.
and on and on and on. And I am one person who was still employed, right? So from the outside looking in, you're like, you have a family, you got to keep your job. Then you peel back all these layers and it's like, holy moly, how is anybody surviving? Right. But I think it's checking in on people. And I think more importantly, being honest and vulnerable when people ask you. I know that is where I suffer. I know that is where a lot of my strong female friends suffer. And because it's like everybody's got stuff going on, I don't want to pile, but also we're missing that connectedness and we're
Yeah.
missing the point of having friends and having a support system. I know I missed it
Yeah.
because I just didn't want to pile. And then I had a
Yeah.
panic attack. Then I had a
Yeah. I mean,
panic attack.
I think to Alana, it sticks out in my head when she talked about, no, really, how are you doing? Did you burn your
Yeah.
toast this morning? Remember, and it's
Yeah.
true. It's like, it could even be basic of things that happen. And then to her point, like, you really got to check in. Do you want me to be in your space? Do you want me to give advice to you? Do you want me to just listen? And I think those things have to happen because at the end of the day, whether we're working from home or not, we all have a lot going on and we all are very broken people who are just always picking up pieces, trying to get better, trying to reinvent ourselves and renew our energy. And I think it's super important. And when you hear statistics about like more people in therapy, I think that's amazing. I mean, I often, it's on my to-do list, by the way, but I often think like we should have came into the world with like not just a
A
guardian angel.
therapist
Like
on
I
our
need
arm.
seriously, a designated person to
Yeah.
help you, right? There's so many things you don't recognize that bother you. And if you're like me, a tough woman,
Mm-hmm.
unemotional, if you move through life that way, there's a lot of healing you're not getting to, right? My son just asked me, Mom, do you ever cry? And I was
Oh,
like, not really.
that didn't make you
And
cry
he's
that he
like,
asked you that. Of
no, of course not.
course
And
not.
he's like, why not? And I said, it's interesting. I said, God did create tears for a reason. And I think there's a lot of healing in it. And it's very normal and very natural to cry. And I said, I don't know. I'm just made up that way. Right. I blame it on my Capricorn, but I think there's probably, I'm sure, deeply rooted issues that make it there. But anyways, what I was going to get to is I am excited to see that a lot of people are reaching
Mhm.
out for therapy because I think that's important. I'm excited to see that people talk about mental health.
Yeah.
I had stereotyped what I thought that meant. Man,
Mhm.
please. It's not about I have a big issue, I need help. It's about all of us have a mind. Therefore, you have that's part of your health that you have to take care of, whether that's
Yeah.
yoga, meditation, going to therapy. Like mental health applies to everybody. It's not
Yeah.
just, people who are like, hey, I think I'm bipolar, or I think have anxiety or depression. Every single one of us have a mind. Therefore, mental health is important to everybody, right?
Right. And if I didn't grow up going to therapy, I mean, it's so easy to always think that it is trauma equals needing help. And it's just not. I used to stand up. It was funny because I used to stand up in our open workplace and I would say, oh, I got to leave early. I'm going to therapy. And people would like, you crazy girl. Like,
oh, she got
you
some
got
issues.
problems, and I'm like, no,
yeah.
you go to the gym every single day after work. I go to therapy every 2 weeks, right? And has it cured me of all my ailments? No, but that's not even the point either. Like you work out every day. Are you a bodybuilder and you don't need to work out anymore? No, it's not the way that it works. But I think this conversation does go full circle, right? Because we started talking about the energy of teams and, being inclusive in different types of teams and making sure that, you're participating. And I think you have to participate in your own life. And I think you owe it to people around you to participate in theirs.
I agree. And the number one thing I would say specific to the team aspect is you literally need, it ain't even an option. This is just me talking, I'm just giving some game now. You literally have to step beyond only caring about the business and the results, period. Your team will not thrive. Those individuals that work with you, for you, they're not going to thrive if they're not straight. And you got to make sure they're straight no matter what. And so, take some time, spend 15 minutes just talking about them, right? Some of the individuals I talk to, the people they work with, they don't know if they're married or not. They don't know if they got kids or not. They don't know if they do things for fun. They don't know if there's been death in the family. They don't know their mindset and approach to COVID-19 and vaccination. They have no sense what they did before the role they work in. We go through work just working with people. And I'm like, no. So I would just submit without a doubt, if you're in a leadership position, actually scratch that. I don't care who you are. You got to pause and take time to hone in the community around you and create the space that we need and the culture we need. And then, get to business. People are going to drive. Don't get it twisted, right? You have to have still that focus, but you got to slow down and care about how people want to develop, what's going on in their life, who they are, no matter what.
Yeah. You're a person, be a person.
Say it again.
It stopped and I was like, did that make sense? But it does. We're all people. We all went through a lot. There's just so much. There's so much. But, we're here to talk about it, apparently. So
we're here to talk about it.
I think with that, it's
good.
That was fun.
That's fun.
That was me and Mar getting a little bit real. You got a behind the scenes look of how we talk pretty much every day. So
we just hit record today.
So we'll be back again to unpack more of life and work and the pursuit of happiness.
Sounds good. Peace out, team.
MC Radio's off air. Bye.